An alien girl spent 7 birthdays alone. Then a human arrived and changed everything. Zeva was not like the other children of her kind. She lived alone on a planet far from civilization, where the only sounds were the winds blowing across the barren hills and the occasional rumble of distant storms. Her world was lonely, and her heart was heavy. She had no friends, no family, no one to celebrate her birthdays with. Every year, as the day of her birth came around, she hoped for something, anything, to change her solitude. But every year, the day passed without a word, without a gesture, without even a single voice. And every year, Zeva spent that day just like any other, alone. Her planet was beautiful in its own way. It was a world of rolling purple hills, strange trees with silver leaves, and skies filled with two suns. Yet, despite its beauty, it was a place of isolation. Zeva had never seen another living creature, apart from a few creatures that roamed the barren plains. The Lorian people, her people, were scattered across the galaxy. They were an advanced species, with technology that could reshape entire planets. Yet Zeva was abandoned, left behind when a ship had crashed here many years ago. The crash had been an accident, and the wreckage of the ship still lay in a valley, buried beneath layers of sand and dust. The crew, all of them, had died in the crash, and she was the only survivor. The years had passed slowly for Zeva. She had learned to survive in this harsh environment, learning from the wreckage of the ship, salvaging what she could, and using the advanced tools to build herself a life. She wasn't quite like the humans she had heard about in the ancient records. She had the body of a young Lorian, lithe and graceful, but the loneliness inside her made her feel much older than her 7 years. In all those years, she had never met anyone else, and no one had ever come to find her. Zeva had seen the stars at night, and she often wondered if anyone, anywhere, was looking at the same sky, wondering about her, wondering if she was out there. She had never heard any response. There had been no ships, no signals, and no signs of any living being. The silence was a constant companion, but on the eve of her 7th birthday, something felt different. Zeva was standing outside, her small figure silhouetted against the horizon as the twin suns dipped below the distant hills. The air was warm and the ground beneath her feet felt soft, like the surface of a cushion. She had been staring at the wreckage of the ship again, thinking about the days when she was just a child, running through the ship's corridors, playing with the strange machines. She had often wished that she could have been a part of the crew, traveling through the stars with them. But it was just a dream, a memory that was fading with time. She sighed and turned her eyes back to the sky. Her heart ached as she thought about her family, or rather, the family she had never known. Her people had been scattered across the stars for millennia, and she had never seen them. There were no records of any Lorian coming to this planet, no message, no rescue, no hope. As she stood there gazing at the sky, something caught her eye. A bright light, much brighter than the stars, appeared in the sky. It wasn't a star, and it wasn't one of the twin suns. The light grew larger, moving rapidly across the sky. Zeva's heart skipped a beat. Could it be? Could it be a ship? Could it be someone coming to finally find her? Her pulse quickened. She had no way of knowing for sure, but the thought of not being alone anymore filled her with excitement. It had been so long since she had seen another living creature, and the possibility of meeting someone from her own kind, or even from another world, was too much to ignore. The light grew larger still, and Zeva's excitement turned to nervousness. She had seen spacecraft before, many years ago when she was just a child. The wreckage of the ship that had crashed here was a constant reminder of the technology that existed beyond this planet. But this light, this object, was different. It was too big, too fast, too strange. Zeva turned and ran toward the valley where the wreckage lay, hoping to reach the shelter before whatever it was reached her. She didn't know what to expect. She didn't know if it was a ship, a human, or something else entirely. But her heart was racing and her mind was full of questions. When she reached the wreckage, She found a hidden spot in the rocks where she could watch safely. She crouched down and peered out, her heart pounding in her chest. The light grew brighter and the sound of it grew louder, like the roar of an engine. Then, with a loud crash, the light disappeared behind the hills. There was a moment of silence. The ground trembled and the air seemed to vibrate. Zeva held her breath, waiting for something to happen. Her eyes were fixed on the spot where the object had crashed. It wasn't long before she saw the smoke rising into the air, a plume of gray and black curling up into the sky. Zeva's mind raced. What should she do? Should she go and see? Should she stay hidden? Her curiosity got the better of her, and after a few moments she stood up and started toward the wreckage. She moved quietly, blending into the shadows, making sure to stay out of sight. She didn't know who or what had arrived, but she had to know. She had to see for herself. When she reached the crash site, she saw the wreckage of a ship, this one much smaller than the ship that had crashed years ago. It was smoking, with pieces of metal scattered around the site. A human ship, she thought. Could it be a human? She had heard stories of humans, strange, unpredictable creatures who had reached the stars just like her people. But they were nothing like the Lorien. They were rough, wild, and dangerous, or so the records had said. Zeva crouched behind a rock and watched the wreckage. She could see movement, a figure emerging from the wreckage, staggering and limping. It was a human. He was tall, wearing a suit that looked strange to Zeva, but his movements were slow and awkward, like he had been hurt. Zeva's heart beat faster. Should she approach him? Should she help? Her instincts told her to stay hidden, to remain safe, but something inside her pulled her toward him. She had never seen a human before, and the idea of meeting someone from another world, of not being alone anymore, made her heart ache with longing. She took a step forward. Zeva watched cautiously from behind the rocks as the human stumbled away from the wreckage of his ship. His movements were slow, his legs shaky. The crash had clearly taken a toll on him, and the injuries on his body were apparent. There was blood on his uniform, his face scratched and bruised. Yet, despite the pain, he managed to keep moving, each step taking him further from the wreck. Zeva's curiosity grew stronger. She had never seen a human up close, and everything about him seemed so different from what she imagined. His skin was pale, his hair dark and tangled. His eyes, though clouded with pain, were alert, scanning the area as if he were searching for something, or perhaps someone. She couldn't imagine what would drive a human to crash on this barren world, but the thought of not being alone, of meeting another being, overwhelmed her. Her instincts told her to stay hidden, but her heart told her to step forward. For the first time in years, she felt the stirrings of hope. She was no longer the only one on this planet. There was another soul, someone who could possibly understand her loneliness. The human staggered a few more steps before falling to his knees, gasping for breath. His face twisted in pain, and he reached out as though he were trying to steady himself on the ground. Zeva knew this was the moment. She had to act. She couldn't just watch from the shadows any longer. Without thinking, she moved closer, stepping carefully, her bare feet making almost no sound on the soft ground. When she was just a few feet away, Zeva stopped. She felt the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders. What should she do? How should she approach him? She had no experience with humans, no knowledge of how they would react to someone like her. The stories she had read in the old records spoke of humans as unpredictable, sometimes kind, sometimes violent. But in her heart, she knew she couldn't leave him to suffer alone. She took a deep breath and stepped out from behind the rocks, revealing herself fully. The human heard her footsteps and turned quickly, his eyes widening in surprise. For a moment, the two of them just stared at each other. Zeva was tall for her age, her body graceful, with smooth green skin that shimmered faintly under the twin suns. Her large, silver eyes gleamed with curiosity and caution. She didn't know what to expect from this human, but she had to make the first move. The human, for his part, seemed equally stunned. He blinked, his hand still clutching his side where a wound had left a bloody stain. His eyes scanned her, taking in her strange features, her alien appearance. His lips parted as if he wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. Then finally he whispered, his voice hoarse from pain and exhaustion. Who are you?" Zeva hesitated. The language barrier was one of the challenges she had always anticipated. She knew many of the ancient languages, but this human language was unfamiliar to her. Still, she understood enough to know he was asking a simple question. "Who are you?" With her heart pounding in her chest, Zeva took another step closer. She raised her hand slightly, as though trying to show him she meant no harm. I am Zeva," she said softly, unsure of how well the words would be understood. Her voice had the melodic quality typical of the Lorien, a soft, almost musical tone. The human looked at her, clearly confused. He winced, shifting his weight as though the pain from his injuries was too much to bear. "Zeva," he repeated, testing the name on his lips. "I'm Eli Turner." He winced again, his hand pressing harder against the wound at his side. Zeva could tell he was in pain, and it made her feel a rush of concern. She didn't know what to do. She had never healed anyone before, let alone a human. But her instincts kicked in. She knew she couldn't leave him like this. Eli must have seen the concern on her face because he smiled faintly. It was a weak smile, but it made Zeva feel something she hadn't felt in years, something like hope. She crouched down next to him, keeping a safe distance, but her gaze never left his. The pain on his face was obvious, and Zeva knew she couldn't waste time. She had to help him. "I can help you," Zeva said quietly, more to herself than to him. She had no idea what to do for a human, but the technology she had scavenged from the wreckage of the Lorien ship might be able to offer some kind of solution. She had learned much over the years, and she could see that Eli was not going to survive for long without assistance. Eli's eyes widened slightly and he nodded, though his breath was ragged. "Please," he whispered, I need help." Zeva stood up, her eyes scanning the area around them. The wreckage of the ship was still smoking, and she knew there was no time to waste. She looked back at Eli, then towards the distant valley where she had hidden the alien technology she had salvaged. It would take time to get it to him, but she had no choice. She couldn't leave him in this condition. Without another word, Zeva moved quickly, her long legs carrying her with surprising speed. Eli watched her go, confusion written across his face. He had no idea what to make of this strange, alien girl who had appeared out of nowhere, but he couldn't deny the fact that she had a look of determination in her eyes. She was unlike anything he had ever seen, and somehow he felt that she could help him. Zeva didn't waste time. She reached the valley and quickly accessed the technology she had been studying for years. There were devices here, tools that could heal wounds, machines that could stabilize life signs, and medical supplies beyond anything Eli had ever seen. In the wreckage, she had discovered a hidden cache of Lorien technology, far more advanced than anything humans had. After a few moments of frantic searching, she found what she needed, a small, portable device that could administer a healing serum. She ran back to Eli as quickly as she could, the weight of the device in her hands. When she arrived, Eli was still sitting on the ground, his breathing shallow and labored. His face was pale and his eyes were beginning to lose focus. Zeva knew time was running out. She knelt beside him again and placed the device in his hand. "This will help," she explained, her voice soft but firm. She showed him how to activate the device, pressing a button that caused a small needle to extend. "This will stop the bleeding." Eli blinked at her, his mind still reeling from the situation. But with the little strength he had left, he pressed the needle against his side, just as Zeva had instructed. Almost instantly, a cooling sensation spread through his body, and the pain in his side began to subside. He let out a shaky breath, looking at her with a mix of gratitude and disbelief. "You're incredible," Eli managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. Zeva didn't respond immediately. Instead, she studied his face, taking in the relief that was beginning to show. She could see that he was going to survive. He wasn't out of danger yet, but the worst was over. He had made it through the worst of the crash, and now, with her help, he might actually make it. As the two of them sat in the quiet of the alien world, something began to change. For Zeva, this wasn't just about helping a stranger. It was about the connection she felt, something she hadn't realized she had been missing. Eli wasn't just a human. He was someone who could understand her, someone who wasn't afraid of her. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel so alone. And for Eli, it was the beginning of something else, a chance to make a new friend on a distant, lonely planet, and to find something in this alien world that he never expected, a glimmer of hope. As the days passed, Eli's condition improved steadily. Zeva's care and the strange healing device she had used on him worked wonders, though Eli still felt weak and disoriented from the crash. His body was adjusting to the treatment, but his mind remained clouded by the situation. He had never expected to end up stranded on a distant, unknown planet. Even more surprising was the alien girl who had saved him. Zeva was unlike anything he had ever seen, a creature of grace and beauty, with the soft glow of her skin and the sharp intelligence that shone in her silver eyes. Yet, despite the differences between them, there was an undeniable connection forming between them. Every day, Zeva helped him as he regained his strength. She taught him the ways of the planet, showing him how to survive in the harsh environment. They spent long hours walking through the strange landscapes, with Zeva explaining the different creatures and plants that thrived in this unusual world. Eli was fascinated by the knowledge she shared. The planet, though isolated, was alive with mystery, and Zeva was its guide. In turn, Eli told her about Earth, the world he had come from, the people he had known, and the technology his species had developed. He spoke about his work as an explorer, the different places he had traveled to, and the strange, beautiful things he had witnessed in his life. Zeva listened intently, her eyes wide with curiosity. She had never heard of humans before meeting Eli, and the more he spoke, the more she wanted to learn. The stories he told were so different from her own experiences. The way humans lived, the things they valued, and their relentless curiosity about the world, it was all so new to her. As the days went by, their bond grew. Zeva no longer saw Eli as just a human who had crashed on her planet. He had become her companion, someone she could talk to, someone who understood her in a way that no one else ever had. Eli, too, felt the change. Despite the strangeness of their situation, he found comfort in Zeva's presence. Her calm demeanor and wisdom gave him a sense of peace that he hadn't felt since the crash. He had spent so much time alone in space, but now, for the first time, he didn't feel entirely alone. One evening, as they sat on a hill overlooking the distant valley, the setting suns casting long shadows across the land, Eli spoke quietly. "You know, Zeva," he began, "when I first crashed here, I thought I was done for. I didn't think I'd make it out alive. But I never expected to meet someone like you." Zeva turned to him, her face softening. "And I never expected to meet someone like you, Eli. I thought I would spend my life alone. I had no idea there were others out there." Eli smiled, though there was a sadness in his eyes. "Sometimes, we don't realize how much we need others until we're faced with something like this. I thought I was fine on my own, but now, I can't imagine what it would be like without you here." Zeva lowered her gaze, a soft blush creeping across her cheeks. She had never felt this way before, never felt the warmth of companionship, of someone caring for her in a way that was more than just survival. She had been so used to solitude that the idea of a connection was both strange and comforting. I don't want to be alone anymore," she whispered. Eli's heart ached at her words. He could see the longing in her eyes, the same longing that he had felt in his own heart when he had first crash-landed. He reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder in a gesture of comfort. "You don't have to be alone anymore, Zeva," he said softly. "I'm here, and I won't leave you." For the first time in her life, Zeva felt something stir within her, a warmth that had nothing to do with the sun setting behind them. It was the warmth of a bond, of trust, and of something deeper that was slowly growing between them. As they sat in silence, the wind softly brushing against their faces, the weight of their shared solitude seemed to lessen. They were no longer just two individuals caught on a deserted planet. They were two souls who had found each other in the vastness of space, two beings who, against all odds, had forged a connection that went beyond their differences. But as the days passed, a new challenge arose. The winds of the planet had begun to shift, and with it, the arrival of a storm. Zeva had known that such storms were common in this region, but she had never experienced one quite like this. The winds grew stronger, the skies darkened, and the air became thick with electricity. A storm of massive proportions was coming, and it would be unlike anything they had faced before. "We need to find shelter," Zeva said, her voice urgent. Eli nodded, his face tense with concern. "How bad is it going to get?" "Worse than anything you've seen before," she replied grimly. "This planet has storms that can tear apart anything in their path. We need to get to the shelter I've built before the winds hit." Without wasting any time, Zeva led Eli through the increasingly harsh terrain, guiding him toward the small shelter she had constructed from the wreckage of the Lorian ship. The winds howled, whipping at their faces, but Zeva pressed on, her determination unwavering. Eli struggled to keep up, but Zeva's strength and confidence inspired him to keep going. Finally, after what seemed like hours of battling the storm's fury, they reached the shelter. It was a small, sturdy structure built into the side of a rock formation, hidden from view by the terrain. As they hurried inside, Zeva sealed the entrance, blocking out the fierce winds and the sound of the storm raging outside. They stood in the dim light of the shelter, catching their breath, their hearts pounding from the exertion. Zeva's eyes were bright, her expression tense but calm. "We'll be safe here," she said, her voice steady. "The storm will pass, but it's going to take a while." Eli nodded, his body aching from the effort. He was exhausted, but there was a sense of relief that washed over him now that they were safe. He looked at Zeva, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you for getting us here," he said softly. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Zeva's gaze softened, her expression unreadable. She didn't need to say anything. Her actions spoke louder than words. She had saved him more than once, and in return, he had brought her something she had never known before: companionship. She had never expected to find a connection like this, especially not with a human, but it had come when she least expected it. And now, in this shelter, surrounded by the storm outside, she realized that for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid. For the first time in years, Zeva felt like she had found a place where she belonged, beside someone who cared, beside someone who saw her for who she truly was. And despite the storm outside, despite the uncertainty of their future, Zeva knew one thing for sure: she wasn't alone anymore. Eli smiled at her, his exhaustion beginning to fade as the storm outside raged on. There was no telling when help might arrive, or if it ever would, but in that moment it didn't matter. He had Zeva, and for now, that was enough. They had each other, and that was more than either of them had ever hoped for. The storm outside raged on for hours, the wind howling like a furious beast as it battered the shelter with unrelenting force. Inside, the two of them huddled together, trying to make the best of the situation. The air was thick with tension, and Eli could feel the weight of the silence between them. It wasn't uncomfortable, quite the opposite. There was something comforting in the stillness that had settled over them, the knowledge that they were safe, at least for now. Zeva had built the shelter well. It was small but sturdy, made from the remnants of the ship's wreckage, carefully constructed to withstand the harshest conditions the planet could throw at them. But even with the walls firmly in place, the storm outside was still fierce. The winds could be heard slamming against the shelter, the sound almost deafening. Every now and then, there was a sharp crack of lightning followed by a booming thunderclap that seemed to shake the very ground beneath them. Eli had never seen a storm like this. The power of it was overwhelming, and yet, in some strange way, it was also awe-inspiring. Eli sat on a flat stone near the back of the shelter, his body still sore from the crash. Despite the pain, his thoughts drifted back to Zeva. She had saved his life over and over again. In the days that followed their meeting, he had come to admire her more than he could put into words. She was not just intelligent, but strong, resourceful, and unyielding. He had seen the way she moved through the world, calm, focused, and always with a purpose. She had a quiet strength that was impossible to ignore. And yet, despite all her capabilities, there was something else about her, something that Eli hadn't expected to see in someone who had grown up alone on a barren world: vulnerability. In the moments when she wasn't focused on surviving, he saw it, an emptiness in her eyes, a longing that mirrored his own. They were both far from home, both isolated in ways they had never expected. But now they had each other. It was a strange comfort, one neither of them had anticipated. Zeva sat opposite him, her legs crossed beneath her. Her eyes were closed as she focused on the rhythmic sound of her breathing, her face calm and serene. But Eli could tell that her mind was still working, still thinking about the storm outside, about the dangers they might face once it passed. "There's something you should know," Zeva said quietly, breaking the silence. Her voice was steady, but there was an underlying tension in it. Eli turned his attention to her, his curiosity piqued. "What is it?" he asked. Zeva hesitated for a moment, her gaze drifting to the shelter's entrance as if she were searching for the right words. Finally, she spoke again. "The storm outside, it's not just a natural occurrence, it's a warning." Eli frowned, not understanding. "A warning? What do you mean?" Zeva's eyes met his, and for the first time he saw a flicker of fear in them. "The storm comes when someone enters this planet's atmosphere. The wind, the lightning, the thunder, it's all a sign. A sign that the planet is reacting." "Reacting to what?" Eli asked, his heart picking up speed. "What does the planet have to do with anyone coming here?" Zeva looked away, her face tightening. "It's not just the planet that reacts. The Lorian people. They know when someone enters the atmosphere. They've been monitoring this planet for years. My people, my kind, they were supposed to rescue me, but they never did. They left me here stranded." Eli's mind raced as he tried to process what she was saying. The Lorian people, her people, why would they leave her here? And why would the planet react so violently? "Zeva, you've told me about your past, but why didn't they come for you? Why leave you alone?" Eli asked softly. Zeva's eyes were distant, as if the question brought up painful memories. "I was different. I'm not like them. I'm not like the rest of the Lorien. When I was young, I was part of an experiment, one that my people no longer wanted. They wanted to leave me behind, and they did. But the storm, the one you hear outside, it means they're coming. The storm is a warning that they know someone has found me." Eli's heart sank. This was worse than he had imagined. "Your people, are they going to try to take you back?" His voice was tight with concern. Zeva nodded, her face hardening. "They'll come for me. They'll want me back. They won't care what's happened. They'll take me, and if they can't, they'll destroy everything in their path until they get what they want." Eli felt a deep pit form in his stomach. He couldn't imagine the pain Zeva must have felt all these years, knowing that her own people had abandoned her. And now they were coming, drawn by the signal of the crash, intent on taking her back. He couldn't let that happen. "We have to stop them," Eli said, his voice firm. "I won't let them take you." Zeva shook her head slowly. "You don't understand. They're too powerful. My people, my kind, they can control the weather, manipulate technology in ways you can't even imagine. They have fleets of ships, weapons that make yours look like toys. We can't fight them." Eli looked at her, determination hardening in his chest. "We don't have to fight them head on, but we can stop them. We can use their own technology against them. You said you've been using their wreckage for years, right? What if we use that to turn the tables on them? Zeva's eyes widened slightly as if she hadn't considered that idea. You really think we can stop them? You really think we can fight the Lorien? Eli stood up, his body still aching from the crash but his resolve stronger than ever. If we don't, they'll destroy everything. You won't have a choice. Zeva stood, too, her movements graceful yet tinged with uncertainty. She had spent years alone, relying on her own skills and knowledge. She had learned to survive in a hostile world, but the idea of taking on her own people, her own kind, was daunting. The Lorien were powerful. Their technology was unlike anything Eli could comprehend, and they would stop at nothing to take her back. But something inside her stirred as she looked at Eli. He had survived a crash on this planet. He had helped her when she needed it most. He had proven that there was more to him than just the survival instinct. He was someone who believed in fighting for what was right, even if it seemed impossible. "All right," Zeva said, her voice steady now. "I'll help you. We'll stop them." Eli smiled, feeling a surge of hope. It was a slim chance, but it was a chance. And with Zeva by his side, he knew they stood a fighting chance. Together, they could use the very technology that had stranded her here to turn the tide. The storm outside began to die down, the winds shifting to a quieter, calmer state as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon. But Eli knew the real battle was just beginning. The Lorien would be coming. They would stop at nothing to take Zeva back. And when they did, he would be ready. The first light of dawn stretched across the horizon, painting the sky with hues of gold and orange. The storm outside had finally subsided, but the tension inside the shelter was palpable. Eli and Zeva sat together, the weight of what lay ahead pressing heavily on both of them. Zeva had already begun preparing, sorting through the wreckage of the Lorien ship, but she knew that time was running out. The Lorien fleet would arrive soon, and they had to act fast. Eli stood up, stretching his aching muscles. His body still bore the bruises and cuts from the crash, but it was the worry in his mind that weighed most heavily on him now. "We're going to need everything we can find," he said, his voice determined. "If we're going to stop them, we can't just rely on whatever tools we've got. We need a plan." Zeva nodded, her face set in grim determination. "I know," she said softly. "I've been preparing for this moment for years. But the Lorien, they're not like anything you've faced before. They have the technology to wipe out entire fleets in seconds." Eli met her gaze, his expression unwavering. "We can't let that stop us. If we don't do something, they'll take you, and I won't let that happen." Zeva took a deep breath. She had never imagined that someone, especially a human, would stand by her like this. She had spent so many years believing that she was meant to be alone, that her fate was sealed the moment her people abandoned her. But here, in this moment, with Eli by her side, she saw a different future. Maybe it wasn't the future she had planned for, but it was one she was willing to fight for. "We'll use their technology against them," Zeva said, her voice steady. "I've studied their systems. I know how their ships work. If we can disable their communications and create a disruption in their control systems, we might be able to confuse them long enough to escape." Eli raised an eyebrow. "Escape?" Zeva gave him a small smile. "I'm not saying we'll defeat them outright. But we can buy some time. We need to get to the secondary system on the planet, the one they never bothered to investigate. It's an old fail-safe system I built using the ship's core. If we activate it, we can disable their fleet." Eli nodded, understanding now. "All right. We'll need to move fast." They spent the next few hours preparing for what was to come. Zeva worked quickly, her hands moving with practiced precision as she accessed the old systems, pulling up maps and schematics she had memorized long ago. Eli assisted where he could, although the alien technology was far beyond anything he had ever encountered. The strange devices and panels that lined the walls seemed foreign to him, yet Zeva handled them with ease, as if she had been born to use them. As they worked, a part of Eli couldn't help but feel the enormity of the situation. Here they were, two people, one human, one alien, standing against an entire fleet of technologically advanced beings. The odds were slim, but somehow Eli felt that with Zeva there was a chance. She had already shown him her courage, her resilience, and now he would show her his. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, everything was in place. The systems were set, the plans laid out. Zeva stood up, her face grim but resolute. "It's time," she said. "We'll have a few minutes at best. Once they realize what's happening, they'll retaliate. We have to move fast." Eli grabbed the small communication device she had given him earlier, the one that would allow them to communicate once they split up. "You ready?" he asked. Zeva gave a sharp nod. "Let's do this." They moved swiftly, making their way toward the control room where the fail-safe system was located. The landscape around them had changed in the hours since the storm passed, the winds having shifted the sand and rocks into new shapes. It was almost eerie, the planet feeling so quiet and still now, as if holding its breath. As they neared the facility, Zeva looked at Eli. "You know," she said, her voice soft, "I never imagined my life would come to this. I thought I would always be alone. That I would never have a chance to change anything." Eli glanced at her, his expression serious. "Sometimes life throws things at you that you never expect, but that doesn't mean you can't fight back." Zeva smiled at him, her heart swelling with emotion. She had never expected a human to understand her the way Eli did. He had become more than just an ally. He had become her friend, and in this moment, he was the only family she had. They reached the control room, a large, dark chamber filled with blinking lights and strange, alien machinery. Zeva moved quickly to a console, pulling up the last set of codes she needed to activate the fail-safe. But just as she was about to enter the final command, the communication device in her pocket buzzed. It was Eli's signal. "Zeva, we've got trouble," Eli's voice came through, urgent. "The fleet's already here, they've arrived." Zeva's heart skipped a beat. "They're early. We need to hurry." She quickly finished entering the codes, her fingers flying over the console as she typed in the final sequence. The system hummed to life, and Zeva felt a brief surge of hope. It was working. Suddenly, alarms blared and the entire facility shook. A blast of heat rushed through the air as the sky above them darkened. Zeva looked up, her eyes wide with shock. A massive Lorian ship had descended from the clouds, its shadow blocking out the sun. She could see the ship's weapons charging, ready to strike. "Zeva, we need to go." Now, Eli's voice came through again, louder this time. She didn't hesitate. "I've activated the fail-safe. It's up to you now, Eli. Get to the escape route, head for the cliffs. I'll buy you time." "No, we do this together," Eli said, his voice firm. Zeva hesitated for only a second before nodding. "Together." They moved quickly, darting through the facility's corridors, heading toward the escape route that Zeva had prepared. But as they neared the exit, they encountered the first of the Lorian soldiers. Tall, armored beings with eyes glowing like fiery embers, they blocked the entrance, their weapons raised. Zeva froze, but Eli stepped forward, his face a mask of determination. "We don't want to fight," he said, his voice calm but steady. "We're leaving." One of the soldiers stepped forward, its voice mechanical and cold. "You are not leaving. You belong to the Lorian. Come with us." Eli glanced at Zeva, who met his gaze with a quiet nod. She knew what had to be done. She couldn't go back to the Lorian, not now, not ever. With a swift motion, Zeva activated a device she had kept hidden. A blinding light flashed, disorienting the soldiers for a split second. Eli seized the opportunity and lunged forward, knocking the closest soldier off balance. They didn't have much time, but it was enough to escape. They raced out of the facility into the open air, where the final battle would be fought. The Lorian fleet hovered in the sky above them, its weapons charging. Eli and Zeva ran as fast as they could toward the cliffs, their hearts pounding. Behind them, the sound of the Lorian soldiers' footsteps grew louder. When they reached the edge of the cliffs, Zeva turned to face the oncoming force, a final stand in the making. "It's not over yet," she said quietly. Eli looked at her, his eyes filled with resolve. "We've come this far together." With that, they activated the final phase of their plan. The Lorien fleet above them was suddenly thrown into chaos as their communication systems failed, their control over the ships breaking down. A massive explosion rocked the skies, and the fleet began to retreat. Zeva and Eli had won, for now.